Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I'm talking about The Last Order written by Kwame Mbalia, which comes out on October 21st. I did recently have a sneak peek video about this book where I just talked about kind of generally what to expect with no spoilers. Now that the book is out at the time that I'm posting this video, I am going to now give some more expanded thoughts on the book and also some plot details. So as I said in my sneak peek video, I was really glad when this book was announced because the fans have been asking for more of Finn's backstory for a while now, and I'm really glad that we're finally getting that. And we also got Jana's backstory in this book as well. So this is just something that I'm really glad that they decided to expand upon, and I feel like Kwame Mbalia did such a great job with the story and with the characters. And this book also made me view these characters differently in some ways, which I think is a good thing. And that's one of the things that I love about Star Wars books is that we have the opportunity to do that and the opportunity to get into things that the movies don't really have time to get into. I think what's great about it is if there's something that you were disappointed about from a movie, sometimes the book resolves that. At least that's been my experience. And that's something that I've had a lot of fun with. This book is just another example of a time that a Star Wars book has gone back and filled in some of the blanks that at least I really wanted to know, and I feel like a lot of other people wanted to know as well. So I think if you're interested in the sequel trilogy, if you liked the movies, or if you were really interested in Finn or Jana as characters and really want to know more about them, then I think you may be interested in this book. I personally had a great reading experience with it. I really appreciated the stuff that we had revealed about these characters' pasts. There is also a storyline that takes place right after the rise of Skywalker. So we have that, and then we're going back and forth between the storyline shortly after the rise of Skywalker and then back to Finn and Jana's pasts. So we're going back and forth. Personally, I was much more invested in the flashback portion of the book rather than the part that's happening after the rise of Skywalker. But the two do end up being tied together in the end. So you do kind of understand like how exactly they're related. But honestly, I could have had just like a whole book of just the flashback stuff because that was really what had me interested is Finn's time as a stormtrooper. That was really what I was here for. And I was really happy with that portion of the book. Something that is really highlighted in this book is the incompetence of the people that are running the First Order. That is something that we do see in the movies, but I feel like in this book, I kind of understood it to another level. And that the incompetence of the superiors is a really key factor in the path that Finn and Jana's stories take and kind of like why they do some of the things they do, how they ended up where they were by the time that we see them in the movies. That was a common theme in this book is just like like them having to deal with the incompetence of the people that they have to answer to and how that really wears on them after a while. So I really loved the way that the author explored that theme and how we see that there's just so many layers to what these characters had to deal with during their time as stormtroopers. So at this point, I am going to start talking spoilers. So if you haven't read this book and you're planning on it, now would be your time to turn back. So when we open, we do meet a character named Koi Tria who was present during the Battle of Exegol during the part when all of the citizens show up with their own ships. He comes from a family of tea farmers and he has an old beat up ship that sometimes he seems kind of embarrassed by, but he still showed up, or his family still showed up during the Battle of Exegol with their old beat up ship. So this is kind of like right after the end of the Rise of Skywalker, when the resistance is still kind of picking up the pieces and figuring out what they're going to do next. So at this point, Koi is still there at the resistance base. He's kind of sticking around a little bit because it kind of seems like he's still needed. And so that's why he ends up in this place where we open at the start of the book. So pretty much what kicks everything off is they find a shuttle full of kids in First Order uniforms. So the thought is that these kids must have been in the custody of the First Order somehow. Maybe they were going to become stormtroopers, kind of like what happened with Finn and Janna. They don't really know the whole story yet, but they find all these kids, which is obviously bad. And so they need to try to figure out where these kids are coming from. And they also get information that Major Goal, who was a pretty dangerous First Order major, is still around and active, and these kids seem to be somehow associated with him. They need to go address this major that's still out there because he's going to try to continue the war, is the thought that they have. And then throughout the story, we start getting pieces of flashbacks from Finn and Janna's pasts. And something that was really interesting to me about Finn's flashbacks is that in his flashbacks, we see that he really cares about being a good stormtrooper, and he's actually pretty good at it. At one point, he wins a duel, which gets him a special position with this major goal. So we do see that Finn has a lot of personal baggage with this guy, but this was like a very coveted position that he earned. And then at one point we see that he was a squad leader. Finn actually is an accomplished stormtrooper and is very good at what he does. This is something that was surprising to me because in the movies, I got the impression, there's all these jokes about like, oh, he used to mop the room or he was a sanitation, like he didn't really do a whole lot. He didn't really know a whole lot. In this book, that's not necessarily the case. That is something that really surprised me. And I do have a theory about why that is, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, that was something that really had me being like, okay, so there is much more to Finn's story than I really expected. And then in Janna's flashbacks, we see something similar, which is that she also really cares about being a good stormtrooper. She believes in what she's doing, just like Finn does. The two of them genuinely think that they're doing the right thing at this point in their past. The thing about Janna, though, is she's already struggling with PTSD because she was present during an uprising where a bunch of civilians were murdered by the First Order. And that is something that has really stayed with her. And at times she has flashbacks, and it's understandably difficult for her to cope with. And that's what really makes her start questioning what she's doing. So when we start off with these characters, Janna is a little bit more further along than Finn in terms of questioning the First Order and wondering, am I really doing the right thing here? But the thing that keeps her around is she really cares about her squad. Her squad is very much like a family. She's a squad leader as well. They are very much like a family. They have nicknames for each other. She goes through a lot of trouble at times to try to keep them together and not let them get separated. She really wants to be there for her squad. And that is what keeps her going. And that's what keeps her focused on being a good soldier. And what happens with Janna and her squad is they are sent on a series of missions that we see happen in this book. We see them on some different missions. The squad gets endangered a couple times. Like at one point, a couple of her squad members get captured by pirates and she has to like go save their lives. You do see a part where they end up on a mission where they are on a ship that is known for executing stormtroopers that get out of line. So that's another stressful moment for them. And at one point, Janna is told that they are going to be tracking down traitors, and that's another stressful moment. So it's kind of like with Janna and her squad. She's going through a lot of trouble to keep the squad together and try to keep them safe, but they keep ending up getting put in situations by superiors that are very dangerous, or I mean, it's either dangerous because of outside forces or it's dangerous because of the superiors themselves, and they do not really care about the safety of these soldiers. And that is something that becomes more and more clear with each mission that they're sent on, is really that the only people that cares about if they are alive is Janna. And it's also not even just that the superiors don't care. It's also that they are very manipulative and at times sadistic. She's really up against a lot trying to figure out what the right thing is to do in a lot of these situations that she's put in. And what happens with Finn is a similar kind of situation with Major Goal, where he is sadistic, manipulative, also probably corrupt, which we find out over the course of the book. Finn is on a mission as Major Goal's bodyguard with another stormtrooper that he doesn't like. It's the same one that he dueled to get the position. They thought they were fighting to become a squad leader, but it turns out Major Goal was just like seeing what they would do. So the mind games with him started pretty early. But Finn and 55, they do not like each other at the start of the mission, but they end up getting brought together and becoming friends because the mission is just such a disaster that it kind of forces them to work together and get through it. I mean, they end up liking each other by the end of the mission. During this mission, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly that Major Goal is hiding something, and he is involved with a senator. He's pretty much blackmailing a senator. I don't know if blackmail is even the right word for it, because he's threatening the senator's people if she doesn't pay him. Like, he's pretty much showing that the First Order is functioning like a mafia. Like, he shows up, threatens this senator to hurt her people if she doesn't pay him off. Basically, what she's paying for is the protection of the First Order. So, very much mafia like tactics going on. And even though Major Goal is corrupt, something that you see throughout this book is that it kind of seems like most of the superiors are corrupt. So, the First Order likes to say all this stuff about how they're protecting people and helping people. Like, at one point, they make a claim that they're helping people from pirates and things like that. But I mean, if everybody's corrupt, then they're not really actually helping anybody. It's just kind of like a big lie that they like to put out to keep the stormtroopers happy. I mean, happy being used very loosely there. And to keep the people believing that the First Order is going to protect them, when more often than not, it seems like the First Order ends up firing on civilians. The lies are coming out at this point. During this confrontation, when Major Goal is trying to intimidate the senator, it ends up going really wrong, where the senator ends up getting killed, and then also 55 ends up getting shot by one of the senator's hired guards. 55 ends up dying, which is really hard on Finn. Because not only does 55 die in something that really shouldn't have gotten out of hand like that, it also seems like Major Gold just like does not care at all. That is something that Finn can see, and it really affects Finn because Finn expected, his superior to at least care that a mission went bad and someone died for it, but he just has no empathy at all. And this is where it all comes crashing down for Finn. He confronts Major Goal. He realizes that this is all a lie, and that the morale reports that he was listening to at the beginning of the book that used to really get him hyped up about the First Order, it was pretty much like propaganda that they have the stormtroopers listen to. That stuff is just a bunch of lies. It's not real. He realizes that Major Goal was lying about like caring about the First Order. Like, it's just like a whole load of crap. And so what Finn does is he sabotages Major Goal by turning him over to the citizens of this planet that he was threatening. With Major Goal, the last time we see him, we're getting the impression that probably what is happening to him is that he is getting killed by an angry mob that he was just threatening right before this. And after what happens with Major Goal, Finn does return and tell them the whole story. It was unclear to me if Finn actually tells them, like, oh yeah, I turned Major Goal over to the people, or if he tells them, like, oh, the people took him. Like, that part I'm not quite sure if Finn told them the truth about that specifically, but he does tell them the truth that Goal was corrupt. He was threatening a senator. He killed the senator, all of that. And Finn is actually promoted to squad leader after that. And then we see Finn in a very, very similar situation that Jana was earlier in the book, which is that Finn really cares about his squad. He still struggles with coping with the fact that 55 got killed, but he does channel his care and his like drive to help. He channels that into trying to be a good squad leader for these other stormtroopers that he has. And then where we leave off with Jana is that during a mission where they are supposed to be helping somebody, what happens is some of the stormtroopers, first they fire on Jana's squad because of their direction that they received by their corrupt leader that doesn't care about other stormtroopers. And then what also happens is that the same captain that that orchestrated that also was threatening to fire on civilians again. Like, this is a repeated thing with this guy. Like, he's just straight up sadistic. Jana and her squad at this point, they had just had enough and they were like, we are not going to fire on these people, and they refuse, expecting that they are going to die for it. But what happens that they don't expect is that pretty much all of the other squads that are there at this mission, they also refuse to fire. So it's basically this one psycho captain against everybody else who was there. Jana mentions this story on screen in The Rise of Skywalker. This is when her squad, everybody else there, they all throw down their weapons literally and just walk off, and they decide to desert. And pretty much what they do is they fabricate a story that there was a battle and they all died, so that way the First Order doesn't come looking for all of them. But they do successfully desert and leave to go start a new life elsewhere. And then when we come back to the present, what we are dealing with is, it turns out that Coy, Finn, and Jana, they were led into a trap. And the person who set the trap was actually a captain, a different captain from Jana's past. This captain, Captain Shroud, is not the same captain that kept firing on civilians, but she was kind of like, Jana kind of never knew what to expect from this captain, so she wasn't great, but she's the one that led them into the trap. And the reason that she cared is because she was actually Major Gull's sister. At this point, she is no longer loyal to the First Order. The First Order is dead to her. She was just using the First Order as a way to try to get personal vengeance against Finn for what he did when he sabotaged Major Gull by giving him to the people. And so Finn and Jana, they are fully prepared to finish this once and for all and kill Shroud, but or at least take her and punish her legally, I guess you could say. Coy ends up stopping everybody, which Coy and Shroud in disguise, before we knew she was Shroud, they had been flirting earlier in the book. So it seems like they have like a connection. Coy tells them, like, this is not the way to actually stop the fighting. We need to try to come together. We need to rebuild. If we are still going at each other's throats all the time, then that's not going to happen. So Coy does convince Finn and Jana to just drop it and just let it go. Shroud ends up going back to Coy's farm with him and is pretty much just ready to live a quiet life. I guess just this final confrontation, once it was kind of out of the way, I think Shroud was just kind of ready to move on. And then that is where the story leaves off. And now I want to talk about my theory about Finn. So the way that I interpreted this is that Finn in his past is a stormtrooper. Because, I mean, he really cared about being a good stormtrooper, and there was a pretty big period of time where he was totally buying what they were selling, and he thought he was doing the right thing. As a result, we kind of get the impression that he probably has done some bad things because he believed in the overall goal of the First Order to protect people. My thought is, in the movie, when he's talking about how he did sanitation and he's kind of downplaying how good of a stormtrooper he was, I wonder if the reason that he did that was due to shame. Maybe he was ashamed at things that he did while he was a stormtrooper. And so he was like not really wanting to get into all that with the resistance fighters that he met. First of all, was probably afraid that if maybe they knew the whole truth, that he was a good stormtrooper, a squad leader, all that, maybe they would have not trusted him. And then also, I mean, after he had the full realization and decided to desert finally, I mean, maybe he was ashamed of how long he stayed. Because we see in this book, he realizes that it's a lie, but he still stays. His perspective at that point seems to be like, well, if I'm a good squad leader, then that's going to make it right. Which, like, probably did help for a little bit, because I mean, it's better that the stormtroopers have a squad leader who cares than a sadistic squad leader that doesn't care if they live or die. I mean, that probably is better than the alternative, but he still stayed. So that's my theory for why we have a different impression of Finn from the movies when it's kind of seems like, oh, he wasn't that great of a stormtrooper. He was on sanitation and didn't ever see combat, versus what we see in this book, which is that he actually did see a lot and he actually did move up the ranks a little bit as a stormtrooper. And honestly, I like that version better than what I previously thought. I think that that version of maybe Finn was an effective stormtrooper, did some horrible things and he's ashamed of it, and the way that he copes is he tries to distance himself from that as much as possible. I feel like that's a really compelling take on how this character might have had to deal with and work through some of the things that he did. He probably still has a long way to go by the time that we see him in The Rise of Skywalker, because he probably has so much that he has to work through that we as the reader or the viewer don't even know about yet. And I feel like this book really just showed us a little part of everything that he went through and kind of gives us an idea of the type of stuff that he's probably seen. But I mean, you just know that there's stuff that the book didn't cover. So yeah, I really, really love what the author did with this character. It really took this character to the next level in a way that I totally didn't expect. It just made me feel more invested in Finn than I already was, because now we have this layer to him that is a lot more complex than what we get to see on screen. And I really like what the author did with Jana's character as well. So I know I'm just sitting here talking about Finn, but I guess Finn is the character that I'm more personally invested in. But I really liked Jana's story too. And I'm glad that we got to see on the page the story of her deserting and how that actually went down and what the context was. Really liked the way that that was handled as well. It's just no secret that I'm just way more invested with Finn personally, so that's really who I was focused on as I was reading this, as I was just wanting to get back to Finn. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book, what you thought of it. And thanks so much for joining, y'all. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.